Hello, this is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk about a subject that's always fascinated me. What makes music spiritual? You hear people talk all the time about how some composers are more spiritual than others. Bruckner, he's very spiritual. Bach, he's very spiritual. Haydn, not so spiritual. Poulenc, definitely not spiritual. But is choral music? Yes, possibly spiritual. Why? It isn't the fact that it may have liturgical words or sacred words or talk about God or death or, spirits or other things. What makes the music itself tell us that it's spiritual? I think I have some answers to that question, and I want to explore them with you. The first thing I think we need to recognize is that we are hardwired to interpret and understand all music in terms of its relationship to the human voice. All musical instruments are made in imitation of the human voice in one way or another. Melodies, our entire syntax and language of music, is essentially vocal, and its rhythm is that of speech, of words, or that of the dance, that of physical movement, the heartbeat and the normal pace of the human body. That's how we hear music. And what makes it expressive to us is the extent to which it plays on those particular feelings and sympathies that we have for music of a particular type. But as we know, there can be music that does other things. Music can be imitative. It can imitate any kind of noise. It can imitate a storm or bird song or a railroad train or you name it. The noise, the hubbub of a city at the beginning of Bartok's Miraculous Mandarin. Strauss once said he could set the telephone directory to music. Music has that ability to be imitative or programmatic or whatever you want to call it. And that music all has something in common with it as well, which is to the extent that whatever it's trying to imitate isn't a person, the music is non-vocal in its character. It does things that the human voice can't do. It's either faster or louder or has a wider range or has a different kind of rhythm. Something is going on in it that says to us, well, first of all, this isn't a person making the sound. And then, because we know what birds do or we know what trains sound like, we say, it's a train, it's a bird. But intrinsically, the music has to be non-vocal. Now, in order for music to be spiritual then, to give us that feeling of being mysterious and intangible and somehow not related to our normal experience of singing, it has to be non-vocal. And non-vocal in a sense of the way it's written. There are many ways that music can be non-vocal. For example, counterpoint is non-vocal in the impression it makes. Or let me put it to you this way. I don't want to say non-vocal because obviously people sing it. I mean, Palestrina sounds spiritual and it's all vocal. It's vocal music, but it's suprahuman. It's supra-vocal. Why? Because it consists of many lines all going at the same time. And they go at the same time in an even, steady, almost uninterruptedly smooth rhythm. And it has no breaks in it. Its smoothness does not follow the natural pacing of the human breath. The words are sung in long, melismatic scraps of melody that don't ever approach the natural stresses of speech if you were talking, if you were speaking or even singing it normally. So all of those things counteract the natural vocal utterance of those words and the music, and the result is a suprahuman quality. So it therefore follows that the first element of spirituality in music will be the chorus. it will be music for more than a single solo voice, because massed voices, if they're singing chorales or in close harmony, it's a form of communal singing. It's the voice of the multitude, and the voice of the multitude is superhuman, and therefore we associate it with qualities that make sense when attached to words which invoke some form of spirituality. And it doesn't matter what religious denomination it is, or if it's religious at all. It still strikes us as spiritual. And Bach, with his magnificent counterpoint and contrapuntal mastery, also strikes us as spiritual, because the intertwining contrapuntal voices create a musical edifice which is larger or bigger or more transcendental, if you want to use that word, than what a simple voice could do. So in order for music to be spiritual, it has to be, in a way, beyond what a mere singing voice would do in some way. So that means you have to either negate the natural rhythm of the words, you have to negate the natural dance rhythm of the music, which contrapuntal music does particularly well. But what about somebody like Bruckner? Bruckner, who writes music without text that everybody says is spiritual. Well, one of the reasons that people tend to think Bruckner is more spiritual the slower it goes is because the slower it goes, the less the music will track the natural pace and rhythm of human activity. So if you take it at an absolute crawl, the slower you play it, the more spiritual it's going to sound. There's nothing intrinsically spiritual about a chorale. We don't know that it's about God, for example, or about the afterlife. It's rather the orchestration, the closeness of the harmony, and the pace, the slow, long notes that are grander or greater than we would ever hear if we were encountering a melody with a normal sung text or the rhythm of natural speech. All of those things make the music spiritual. What also makes the music spiritual is harmony, modal harmony, for example, that impresses us as ancient, as somehow not normal. Also, at the other end of the scale, extremely dissonant harmony works the same way. There's a reason, for example, that when Stravinsky adopted the 12-tone method, he did so almost exclusively in terms of sacred music. Why? Because the absence of tonally anchored melody takes the text and places it in a completely alien relationship to our normal human experience. And because those words are sacred words, we interpret that alien experience as a spiritual one. I mean, if you listen, for example, to Holst the Planets, especially, the last one, Neptune, it's very spacey. Why do we interpret it in terms of outer space? Well, there's the scoring, there's the dynamics, there's the rhythm, but all of those same qualities are what we normally encounter when we call something spiritual. Holst calls it the mystic, and that's an appropriate name for that kind of music that has no distinct rhythm, no distinct melody. It's all just texture and pattern and unusual harmony. Minimalist music, for example, is trance-like, of course, and can also be seen as spiritual. Why? Because it relies simply on repetition of small melodic fragments that simply go on and on and on, seemingly without end. Again, it's a non-vocal type of music. Even when it has a text, even when it has words to it, the music itself is telling us that it is speaking or singing or transmitting a message that impresses us as spiritual. So these are just some thoughts I've had, and I'd be very curious to know how you feel about the topic too. I personally think that the ability of music to convey spirituality is one of its most remarkable qualities. It really is. because composers, in order to do that, have to write music which is non-referential, non-vocal, non-imitative, but our own inner imagination and mind, our own experience, our own feelings do all the rest. We hear all of it in terms of our natural selves. Anything that is outside of our natural selves, but which does not have a clear alternative explanation, has a very good chance of being heard as spiritual music. Let me know what you think about it. Thank you, and keep on listening.